Welcome to the Making Waves at Sea Level podcast with your host, Tom Singer. In each episode, we will explore the interesting stories of business executives, entrepreneurs, and industry leaders who are shaking things up and growing their companies. It is time to make some waves. Now here's your host, Tom Singer.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Making Waves at Sea Level, the podcast formerly known as Cool Things Entrepreneurs Do. I have had so much fun. Now we are at like almost 600 episodes. This one I think is like 591 or 92, something like that. And I've had so much fun along the way. I have interviewed entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, business leaders, CEOs, people in all different industries. But my favorite things to do is to invite some of my really good friends onto the podcast and just have a conversation. And today I have like a really early exclusive. It's not really exclusive, but it's really early. I have the 2020 Toastmasters World Champion of Public Speaking, Mike Carr, here on Making Waves at Sea Level. So Mike is a friend of mine. We've been friends for a couple of years, and especially over about the last 18 months, we've become really good friends. And I will tell you something, is that both of us separately have been really involved in Toastmasters. Before I was a professional speaker, I was really involved in Toastmasters. It's sort of how I cut my teeth and learned how to be able to tell a story in a business way. And in 2002, which was 18 years ago, I came in the top 18 in the whole world in their international speech contest, which back then 20,000 people entered at the club level. And then I ended up in the top 18 in the world. And people say, Tom, how did you end up in the top 18 in the world? Only 9 people go to the finals. Well, I went to the semifinals and I was the runner-up to one of the finalists. There were 9 finalists. So if you do the math, I was in the top 18 in the world. But here's the thing. The guy who beat me, he went on to win the whole thing, which means maybe I was number 2. We just don't really know. So I'll stick with I was in the top 18 in the world. And I was always really proud of that until today, the day we're actually recording this at the end of August. Toastmasters had their international speech contest. Now this year, because of COVID, they had to cancel their conference. And I've been to one of their international conferences. There's usually a couple thousand people in a big fancy ballroom. People are hugging. There's beers being drank in the bar afterwards. However, in COVID world, everybody had to stay home. So this year, Toastmasters did a great thing. They didn't cancel their event. They said, let's pivot. And they moved their contest to an online deal. So it actually was recorded yesterday and then broadcast today with the winner being announced. And so I had the pleasure to spend the morning watching the entire contest with a couple of friends, one of them being my friend Mike Carr, who was a finalist. And then, like a half hour after the contest ended, they announced the winner, and it's Mike. And so I had made him promise me, back when he was going to the semifinals, that if he won, he had to come on this podcast, like first, before he could do any other podcasts. And not only is Mike Carr the world champion of public speaking for the year 2020, he is also a man of his word. And so he is here on Making Waves at Sea Level. So Mike, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you. I am actually honored and truly honored to be here.
Well, I think you have
first podcast, first interview, first anything.
Nice. Post victory.
Trophy.
That's awesome. So Mike's background is for 25 years, he has been a financial analyst, and he actually helps clients see around financial corners. Now, that's something, I don't just have a financial corner. I have like a financial brick wall. I probably should be working with Mike so we could find the corner. He's really good at what he does. He's been extremely successful. He's grown year over year, this great financial consulting practice. And he's also a speaker in his own right. He actually talks to people about how do you ramp up communication in this virtual world, which actually sets him up really well for what went on in the Toastmasters world. And then he also talks about a couple of other topics that maybe we'll get into on that. But so Mike, tell me a little bit about your career. Let's forget about today. I know that a lot of stuff going on today, but let's talk about your career as a financial planner and then what you do as a speaker.
Right. Sure. And I actually started out in politics years ago, where I was working with my foray into finance was working with a U.S. senator who was on the Senate Finance Committee, but had worked around politics for a while, quickly figured out that the world of politics is a very political world. And
boy, you had to be a smart kid to figure that out. Boy, politics is really political.
Right. So decided to scoot past that. And actually one of the big, I went into politics because I wanted to make a difference. But then I started seeing that the people who truly were able to make a difference were those in the free market. So pivoted, went over into the free market. I was sitting at breakfast one day with a guy who was working at Merrill Lynch. And I just asked him, what do you do? And what he described was something that sounded like 1 foot firmly planted in sales and marketing and 1 foot firmly planted in applied macroeconomics. And that fascinated me. So went and talked with his managers, started a practice there, failed every way I could, tried everything. And little by little, that practice began to grow, and then ended up selling it to then Payne Weber, which was being bought out by UBS. Went in and managed offices for them for about 8-9 years, and then really missed working directly with clients. I was really more managing. I was managing individuals who were working with clients. And there is a firm actually here in Austin. It is the oldest financial planning firm in Austin. Had my neighbor lived down the street, and he typically would wander down the street with a bourbon and Coke in his hand. And then one day I saw him coming, and he had 2 tumblers in his hand. And he came over and he said, "Hey, what would you think about our going into partnership together?" And that we were transitioning from a founder who had built a great business, and we were looking at transitioning then that business into somebody, and he needed to talk with somebody whom he could trust, and hopefully whom he liked at least a little bit, but also somebody who was not green.
Right. So you've been working there now and growing that business for how long?
Been 8 years.
Yeah. So going back to what you were saying about starting your career, you said, going to work at Merrill Lynch, I know a lot of people who have done that. And you said, you struggled and you struggled and you tried and you failed. That's common for people who work in lots of industries, certainly in financial services. But you had a stick-to-itiveness. You kept going. And that is something that I think always leads people to success, right? Well, maybe not always, but people who succeed always have that stick-to-itiveness.
Right. Right. And I would say one thing also is I was fine with simple pleasures because that's all I could afford for a long time, or we could afford for a long time. So my wife did a lot of little side jobs. I actually threw a paper out for a while to get the mortgage paid so I could continue on the financial services business.
And that's fascinating because so many people aren't willing to go do something like that, but you did what you had to do. Now, along the way, you guys also had a couple of kids, right?
We did.
How many kids? Mike, just tell everybody who's listening how many kids you have.
We have 8 children.
And they range in ages from, I know the youngest are twins and they're 13 years old. How old is the oldest?
Right. Yeah. The oldest is my first baby girl in Chicago now, and she's 29.
Nice. My oldest lives in Chicago. They should hang out once COVID is over.
They should.
So, it's interesting because with 8 kids, you have to do what you have to do to get the mortgage paid and to get people fed and things like that. So did you always have sort of that roll up your sleeves and do what it take attitude even as a kid?
I don't know. I would say, if I'm really honest, but I think this is true with a lot of people. We put that persona out there that I'm always roll up my sleeves and go. But the reality is, there are times I get tired. There are times I get discouraged. There are times I was not confident and did not think I could do it. There are times I have shrunk back from doing what I really could have done or should have done. And when I really a lot of times I will go in and talk with leaders and will end up listening. And if they will really be real with me, then I hear that from everybody, that everybody faces those dark nights of the soul. And there are times when they press through brick walls, and there are times when a paper in the wind could blow them over.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've got days I curl up in a little ball and want to cry.
Oh yeah. 2008, in financial services,
yeah. I would say 2020.
Yeah. 2020 is a good example as well.
So Mike, so you've been successful in that world, but I also know that you got involved with working on your communication skills many, many years ago. You've been in Toastmasters over 25 years. You and I are about the same age. I've been involved about the same amount of time in learning how to communicate better. So what made you say, I'm a financial planner, boy, if I could communicate better, I would have more success? What made you join a Toastmasters club, 2.5 decades ago?
Right. There were two main things. As I was communicating a message early on, it was an investment program and financial planning. Financial planning was a new concept 25 years ago outside of some boutique little shops around. So as I would communicate those two ideas, I would find myself saying and so and as I was thinking, to the point of distraction. That was the first problem. Second problem was, and this was the biggest problem, I would start going down a line of discussion, and then I think of something and I run off on a tangent, and I think of something else, I run off on a tangent, and then another tangent, and then I couldn't remember what the original question was or the original point. So I ducked into Toastmasters because I had a buddy who said, you need some help with that. And I know where you can get some.
And it's so funny because, I mentor people, and one of the things I always tell them to do, especially if they're in their 20s, is join a Toastmasters club, participate every week for 2 years, and you will never be sorry that you made that time investment. It doesn't cost very much, and you'll just be a better communicator. I had no idea when I got involved for many of the same reasons, right? My story is like yours. I actually gave a presentation for my boss because he got called out of town, and it was epically bad. To the point it was so bad it got back to my boss. And so part of my review was, you're going to join a Toastmasters club. And I didn't even know what it was. And back then you had to send Toastmasters a letter, and they mailed you information about the clubs in your area because there was no internet. And right. I remember showing up at it thinking everybody was going to be these super polished speakers. And I showed up at a Jim's coffee shop in North Austin and went to, it was called Balcones Toastmasters. It's still around, but I ended up moving south. So I left that club a long time ago. But, and I literally was just blown away when I started doing it, how quickly I was able to learn and grow and everything along those lines. And I liked getting better at it. I didn't know I was going to end up being a professional speaker and doing the things that I do now, but it definitely impacted my career outside of speaking. Do you agree? For most people, if you're a better communicator, it's going to help you grow your career no matter what you do. Oh,
it's so true. It's so true. And I was never at the level I was at Merrill Lynch and UBS, and then a small private bank out of Dallas, SWS, before they got bought by Hilltop. And I was never at the level of probably some of the individuals that you talk to, but I was just below to be able to see who continued to climb, who would keep going. And at that level, whenever they get up close to the CEO and a couple levels down, everybody's good. Everybody's talented, and everybody is brilliant. So the difference that I saw was the difference of the people that moved forward, or even more importantly, actually drove results, were those individuals that were able to take those ideas and communicate them out to their teams and those that worked below them. But if they could even inspire those people who were working below them, it was rocket fuel on their career. Yep. And I've always said it's a little bit of the chicken and the egg. Are CEOs great communicators because they learned to be great communicators on the path to be CEO? Or did they become CEO because they were good communicators? Is vice versa? Did they get the job because they're a good communicator, or did they learn to communicate while they were growing that job? And I think both is the answer. It can be either one, but it's very rarely you run into a leader at that level. It happens, but it's very rare you run into a leader at that level who can't communicate at least well. Right, right. Really honest and self-aware CEOs tell me in quiet at the bar with a nice, after I've bought a couple of drinks usually, is I'm not the best strategist. I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I just happen to be able to communicate the vision the best. And so I need people around me.
Absolutely. Yeah. So really quick, because I do want to talk about this kind of huge accomplishment that happened just a few hours ago. But what led you into speaking as part of your career? Did you start doing it as a financial planner and then you went on to these other topics? What brought you there?
I'd always enjoyed speaking and telling stories, going back to times I grew up in church, and I'd give the sermon whenever the little class of guys did. It was only guys back then, and I would give the sermon. So I liked being up in front of people. I just needed some direction. So as I was looking a way to build a financial services business, I thought about, well, hey, I was a big Zig Ziglar fan. I thought, hey, to be a professional speaker or what? And my wife said at some point, she said, well, speakers got to talk about something. So it could be financial services. So I started doing financial seminars. And that's really what built that first business, was that took off. There was a need, and I tried to make them at least a little entertaining.
Sure. So nowadays you kind of help people with this idea of how do you ramp up your communications in this virtual world. But one of the things you do, and I started on it in the introduction, but I want to go deeper on this for just a second. One of the things you talk about is how motivation is no longer but determination is. And I love that. I've heard you talk about that before, but can you elaborate on what's wrong with motivation and why is determination better?
Right. And really the only reason I throw motivation under the bus is because everybody just believes that motivation is the only thing. What I've found, and there's so much wonderful psych research on this, is that leaders, well, let's just stop. If you look at the DISC exam, the DISC, 50% of all leaders are Ds, D dominant, right? But Ds only make up 3% of the population. Okay. So what that means is that a D dominant has up to 97% of her team sees the world very differently than she does. So she is building messaging. She's building compensation programs that they're not bad. They're strongly motivating. They're motivating for someone like her. They're motivating for a dominant personality. So motivation is really not bad, but what I call determination is actually what this final speech was about today. I just encourage the audience that don't look at the results. And my mission today was that there are such a population out there that have magic in them that they are keeping in because they are so afraid that if they let it out, the results just won't be there. And so what I tried to do is give them air cover to say, then don't look at the results. Just the try is the victory. The winning is opening up and sharing your magic with the world, whatever that may be.
Nice.
And real leaders who can identify that can make a huge difference in the productivity of their teams.
Sure. So you've been involved in Toastmasters over 25 years. How many years have you entered the International Speech Contest at your club level?
Oh my goodness. I can't count. I've
most
lost.
Years? Did you enter do you enter at your club most years?
Most years.
Yeah.
Yes.
So 20 times. Let's make up a number. So 20 times.
Right.
And this and the way the International Toastmasters Championship works is, I believe, at least this is the way it was 18 years ago when I placed in the top 18 in the world. Did I mention that? Oh yeah, I did.
I actually read that somewhere else.
Yeah, that's right. There were 6 levels. So you had your club, then you had an area, then you had a district, then you had a division, then there was the region, which was sort of the semifinals, and then there was the actual championship that was held at their convention. Is it still the same way? Is it still 6 times that you have to compete?
I think they've added a 7th, actually, because Toastmasters has grown, particularly in Asia and And now in the Middle East, it's really growing.
In fact, I heard that this year 30,000 people entered at their club level, because I always remember 20,000 people had entered at their club level in 2002, because I always thought, wow, that's a lot of people. So, 17 years, 18 years later, that's a 50% growth of the organization around the world. That's a lot.
Right. So now it's club, and then you go to area, division, and then district. And then district goes to a regional playoff, a regional contest that's all video. And then out of the region goes to semifinals, which are 28 individuals in 4 different semifinals. And then the finals are the final 8.
Sure. So this year, in the middle of their competition, because it starts at kind of the first of the year at the club, in the middle, they had to pivot to everything had to be video. So What was it like having, you've made it to the semifinals before. What was it like to suddenly see the whole organization have to pivot and realize, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be on a big stage to do the last several levels. I'm going to have to record something. Was it daunting?
Actually, it was kind of fun. It was a little like surfing, because I started out, it was live, and then COVID came in, and we didn't know how COVID would affect, and then everything went online. So we were doing video. Well, we didn't know if COVID would go away before the international convention in August. So it kind of hung out there. You didn't know if it was supposed to be in Paris this year. Didn't know if I was going to be hopping a plane. Didn't know if we were going to do it virtually.
Oh, wait a minute. You could have won this whole thing in Paris?
I was in Paris this morning. I just was there.
It felt like Paris. Is that what you're saying? So to do the 6 or 7 levels that you have to go through, you do 3 different speeches, right? It's one takes you up the first several levels, and then the semifinals and the finals have to have totally unique new speeches. Is that correct?
Only 2 now.
Oh, okay.
You can do the same speech all the way through the semifinals, but it has to be a completely different speech
for the finals, for the championship. So the speech that I watched you do this morning, and it was recorded yesterday, and my memory of the way this worked is they had all 8 contestants yesterday compete back to back like you would live. In sort of a private setting, and it was recorded, and the judges were there, and the judges made their decisions, and then they broadcast it this morning as the last day of the International Online Convention. Is that right?
Yes.
So you got to watch yourself this morning, not knowing that you would place or win or anything else. And you and I were together with a couple friends. It was kind of fun. I was watching you on the television. Our friends had set up outside so that we could be masked and socially distanced in their backyard. And I was watching the TV that they put out there, but then I was watching you, and it was kind of fun to watch Mike on the TV. Was that surreal?
It was a little bit. One of the things that was the most surreal, when you first walked in and I was behind the tree.
Yeah. So I showed up at my friend's backyard, and I jumped like about 3 feet because I passed this big tree, and he's like right there. It was like, what the hell?
Yeah. Well, it's because I woke up this morning and I just thought, oh no, I reached too far. I took some risks in that speech for a Toastmaster audience. And I thought, I woke up this morning, no, I reached too far. It's going to suck. And I hadn't seen the video of myself, so I just didn't know how it translated. So it had just come up, and I had raced forward to watch myself before I sat with my friends to watch me in case it really sucked. I could go, nope,
I'm not winning, by the way. Yeah, right. So you took some risks, and I will tell you. So I'm a super heavy critical person to have watch speakers. In fact, even other speakers are like, God, Tom, cut people a break. I mean, I watch for 2 things. I look for content, and I look for ability to captivate as a speaker. Now, within Toastmasters, there's some other things. There's the way you use your hands. There's the way you use vocal variety. There's other things they're looking for. But I'm just looking for, are you captivating me? And is there something worthwhile in your content? And I thought, you blew me away. And I was watching everybody. And when you came on, I tried to say, I'm not sitting next to him and he's not my buddy. And I just thought that you had won. Like, I've been to enough Toastmasters things that I know it's always close and things like that. But afterwards, I told our friend, there's no way he didn't win. You were head and shoulders above, and it was because of those risks you took. So tell us about those calculated risks that you took that were taken because we were in a virtual world.
Right, right. The original speech I had planned to give today, it was a speech that was designed for a big stage. And so I had originally thought I would just give that speech standing in front of the camera and maybe move around a little bit. But then the more we dealt with this virtual environment, it just started to kind of play on me. And I thought, okay, it's completely outside of my control whether I win or not, whether a certain group of judges pick me or don't pick me. So what would be fun? What would, and the audience has seen now the smaller stage for so long. You can't go side to side. So what would be fun? And I had a really good, Amy Samet.
Oh, yeah.
Amy Samet had texted me and said, just remember, if you're having fun, the audience will have fun. And I thought, ooh, and so you know what? I'm going to cut you off. That is awesome advice, because I would say, if you were to say what was something that made Mike stand out, it was, I think you had the most fun. Other people did too. Everybody was great, by the way. I'm not dissing anyone in that competition. Everyone was great. Anyone could have placed. But I definitely, Amy, I hope Amy will listen to this. I love Amy. I haven't seen her in ages, but back when I used to compete, I competed against her locally. I know her through Toastmasters from long ago. She gave you the best piece of advice imaginable, because that, when you said it, I'm like, well, duh, you had so much fun as you did the presentation. It was super clear. Well, thanks. Yeah. And it was, it was fun. It was fun. And so it was even if I had not placed at all, I would have walked away saying that was a fun experience. That was an interesting experiment, and it was a fun experiment. And so some of the risks that I played was I ended up down in the corner. I started the speech down in the corner where the only thing you could see was my head.
Yeah, it was like your nose up. It was your eyeballs and your hairline was all you could see.
Right. Because I start telling the story of a kid. The speech drops into the middle of a story of a kid in 6th grade watching a movie, and so I thought, okay, that could be fun. Small, short kid, and it's probably something different. Then I also thought about this defined space around us, and I thought, okay, you can't simulate sliding a door. If you're on a big stage, you can't simulate sliding a door over or climbing up out of a hole. But if you're in this virtual environment, you could. And so played with some of that. I also came up at one point, put my thumb completely over the camera to black it out, simulating the lights going out. And I just didn't know if Toastmaster judges would absolutely hate that or not. Or if the audience would hate that. That's when I was looking at it when you walked in. I just didn't know if that would translate. There was a time I flashed in front of the screen simulating, remember the old films and a film projector, that as they would get caught up, they would kind of stutter. And
when the film would burn and get all shaky, if you were in a movie theater, you did a good job. You ran your hand like an inch in front of the camera really, really fast, simulating that flashy breaking of the film.
Right. And I didn't know if that would look cartoony, or not. But I wanted to give it a shot because I hadn't seen anybody else in any environment, Toastmasters, non-Toastmasters, industry. I'm convinced, I think kind of like you, Tom, that we'll go back to live events, but this virtual experience is here to stay, and it will become both and. And so, for individuals in the Toastmaster audience who are going to be on virtual and communicating that way, I kind of wanted to blow things open and say, okay, look, you can play with this, and you're a lot more creative than I am. Go take risks. What could you come up with that I could steal?
Well, and the other thing that you did really effectively, and I've seen some people on Twitter and Facebook and stuff from the Toastmaster world, because of course I've been following it all afternoon as everybody's going, oh my God, he was so great. And one of the things people talked about was your use of the virtual stage. And I don't know, and I've been speaking virtually long before COVID, but certainly the last 6 months. And I don't think I've actually thought of the rectangle that we sit in on Zoom as our virtual stage. But as you said, you started in the lower corner, then you rose up, and you can't really go side to side a lot in a little short box because you got to be close enough to the camera. This is one of the things a lot of people like to stand up and be far away and their whole body is there. It's like, I can't even see your face. You're too far back. So you don't want to do that. But at the same time, if you're 2/3, if you're like chest level up and you go side to side, now you're going to make me seasick. But what you did that was so good was you moved in close to the camera as you told part of the story. I mean, your nose came in closer. And then at one point, as you talked about like being a kid and backing away, you actually took those steps back. And so you used the close up and far back part of that stage in a way that I haven't seen a lot of people do, especially in something as important as the World Championship of Public Speaking.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, it was fun to play with, and I did not know if it would work.
And it did.
It did. But I think that's one of the things in some of the things that you're asking what I speak about is I think that if we don't get so tied to results, it does tend to blow the doors open where we're willing to try some things. And if leaders can give air cover to something like that, maybe the challenge is how do you help individuals have success when they're maybe failing, but they're contributing to the productivity and innovation of the group. And that those smarter minds than me will figure out how to do that. But
well, and in interviewing, hundreds and hundreds of executives, trying new things has been something that when I say, how do you make waves? How do you shake things up in your company? That's one of the really common answers that people have is that, if you don't try it, you're never going to be able, to succeed. And so the fact that you were willing to take those risks, play with the camera, play with the foreground and the background, cover up the camera with your thumb, whatever it was, by doing those things, you were able to create an experience that obviously stood out for the judges and put you into that first place arena. So we all watched the contest together, but then you had to go home because had you won, they were going to interview you, at the very end of the conference. So you left. And then you went home, and then 15 minutes later, they announced the winner. So I didn't get to be with you when you found out. What did it feel like when you found out that you were the 2020 world champion of public speaking?
I thought, I didn't see that right.
Did they say Mike? Did they say Mike Carr?
Right. I thought, wait. I pulled that back up.
I will say he texted me, holy shit.
That's right. That was, I didn't quite say that in front of my kids, but I was in our master bath. I was getting dressed just in case I needed to be on camera. And I refreshed the screen and looked down at an infographic. I found an infographic came up where there was a triangle and I was or a pyramid really fit. And I was at the top of that and I started, did that say first place? my kids and my family said they heard me say from back here, oh, crap. And I said, I don't know what that means. That means that Dad either won or he lost or he dropped a roll of toilet paper. I don't know what that means. But they came around and I kept looking at it. Yeah.
Your wife posted a video online of the kids jumping up and down and hugging you and stuff like that. I thought that was really, really cool. So what happens now? What do you do? So I appreciate that Making Waves at Sea Level is your first podcast appearance because I'm going to make a little prediction.
All right.
In the world of COVID, everyone who breathes air has started a podcast. A lot of people in the speaker world have started podcasts. A lot of people in the Toastmasters world have podcasts, and other worlds. My guess is that you're going to be doing a lot of podcast interviews as the world champion of public speaking. But what, I mean, how does this, what does it mean?
It's a good question. And the Toastmaster folks asked me that, how will this change your life? And the reality is I don't know. I don't know how it will change. I think the thing that this does give me is the credibility to say to that population that is holding their magic inside, as I've chosen to describe it, to give with credibility now to be able to say, no, if you just give it a try, if the results scare you to death, it still can work to ignore that and just try something and that be the win. Now, there's a certain population that the results drive them. They need them there. But if you could have an entire other population of teams or creativity come online, and that's really my mission, if I have anything. And I think this gives me some credibility, maybe to say, to talk about that, talk to that population and talk about that. And then maybe just to be able to tell more hopefully funny and entertaining stories around life and business principles to audiences about finance, productivity, leadership, and communication.
And the World Championship of Public Speaking, I didn't look this up, but I think it began in like the 80s. It's not as old as Toastmasters, but it goes back to the 1970s or 1980s. You actually are the second person from Austin that I know of. Maybe there was another one, but David Brooks, who was a friend of mine, was the 1990 world champion of public speaking, and he had been a school teacher, and he actually parlayed that into being a professional speaker and corporate trainer for an entire career. And Darren LaCroix, who is like one of the leading educators on how to use humor when you speak and things like that, he had parlayed his victory into an entire career training people how to communicate and things like that. So I think that the world might be your oyster. Is that are you hoping to speak more often now?
I am hoping to speak more often. I love my day job. I love, there's nothing like someone coming in and being so distraught about their personal, and, because money touches everything, or everything touches money. And be so distraught about their situation and go through some planning and watch the weight lift off their shoulders because they know it's going to be okay. So I love that. But to be able to talk about messages, there's also a lot of bad messaging, bad ideas out there about finance and investing, maybe to dispel some of those. And I do love speaking, do love storytelling, and trying to take something technical and make it funny, interesting, and entertaining.
Yep.
And to be able to do more of that in my life, I just have to pinch myself.
Well, I'll tell you, I know that you actually have to be on another call with some people from Toastmasters and stuff at the top of the hour here. So I've only got you for a couple of more minutes, but I do have to say that it was so much fun to be able to see this happen to a friend. I literally almost started crying when I found out that you had won, and it was just so moving to see you do it. And it couldn't happen to a nicer person. You legitimately are one of the nicest people out there. So if you're a company who listens to this and you have team meetings or you're a meeting planner, I'm going to tell you right now, you got to track Mike Carr down quick, because my guess is his speaking fee is going to go up. And I think the other thing is that you are essentially the first person to ever win this in a virtual format. So you get a little asterisk in a plus way next to you that you didn't just win it. You won it the year of COVID, when you had to do it differently. You had to pivot. You had to try new things. You had to be brave, and you had to be determined to just make it work for you. And you focused, not on the results, but the experience, which is what you teach. So that all seemed to pay off. Any last words for people who are listening to Making Waves at Sea Level on what they can do with communication to make waves?
I would say probably to that group that wants to get to sea level, that to give it a shot, try something. And why do we want to get to the end of our lives not having given it a shot? A lot of times we won't be picked, but we can live courageously and bravely out there doing that. And in communication, a Toastmaster group is a great process, and practice improves everything. So but it is those individuals who are able to communicate the vision, inspire the vision, who end up moving up the ladder.
So if someone's listening to this and they're trying to track you down, how do they find Mike Carr, the 2020 world champion of public speaking? Can I say that too much? Is it getting old yet?
No, well, no, not to me, but I'm biased, and it's still day of. So
how do they find you?
Find me. MikeCarrOfficial.com is a good place. I'm also on all the socials, LinkedIn, Mike Carr, and Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you so much. Thanks for being a good friend, and thanks for letting me go along a little bit on this journey with you. It was so much fun. And like I said, I can't remember smiling as much through COVID as I have for about the last 5 hours. So thank you for bringing joy to your friends who got to see you do this. Seriously, people, look them up. I'm sure, probably not this week, but I'm sure soon Toastmasters will have your winning speech posted all over the place. People can track it down. I'll try to link it from my page once that is posted somewhere where it's easy to access. But again, Mike, thank you for being on the show. I know that your day is very busy, but I appreciate I was just kidding around a couple months ago when I said, if you win the first interview, is on Making Waves at Sea Level. So thanks for keeping your word. Thanks for doing that.
That's what kept me going. I thought I can be on Tom's.
That's why he won.
Podcast.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That was his motivation right there. Thank you very much for everybody who tuned in and listened. I say it every time. If it wasn't for the audience, why would we even do this podcast? I hope that you enjoyed today's interview as much as I did. Like I said, getting to sit here and talk with a friend is awesome, but in 30 seconds, he's due on another call. So at this point, I am going to wrap things up for today. I'm going to be back in a couple of days with an interview with somebody just as cool as Mike Carr. And I know you're thinking, how in the world is that even possible? But I'll figure out a way to do it. And thank you to my sponsor, as always. That is Podfly Productions. Check them out at podfly.net/coolthings. We'll see you soon.
Thank you for listening to the Making Waves at Sea Level podcast. Without your listening to these in-depth conversations, there would be no show. Connect with Tom at tomsinger.com and follow him on Twitter and Instagram at tomsinger.